I analyzed the history of pop music via the Billboard Top 10 for the last 60 plus years, and today I want to share 4 ways in which today's pop music is definitely worse than it used to be. I said I wasn't going to do this. I said I was going to show my work by walking you guys through that 660 plus song playlist, but a viewer recently changed my mind. I recently got several comments from the same apparently bored guy that my videos on music getting worse are silly nostalgia. I can totally understand why someone might think this. It's a criticism that's been made of Rick Beato for his videos bemoaning the state of modern pop music, and I think with some justification given his pretty Swiss cheese-like arguments, which I've analyzed in another video. But the point that I've made and will keep making is that although Rick hasn't done the thorough analysis necessary to demonstrate how in fact pop music has gotten worse, and although he hasn't defined any sort of standard by which to make such judgments, which are commonly, but I think mistakenly, considered to be entirely subjective, I think both of those things are possible. Although there's definitely more to be said on this topic, I think I've at least laid the groundwork for defining a standard by which to evaluate music in my video, What is Good Music? And I want to expand on that here in this video. I've also done a pretty damn thorough analysis of the history of pop music, and as promised, I will summarize my results here on this channel after walking through that entire 660 plus song history of Billboard Top 10 hits. But let's face it, getting through that much music is going to take a long time, and in the meantime, comments accusing me of silly nostalgia are going to continue to accrue. So again, I want to do what I said I wasn't going to do, which is to share with you at least some of my findings on the ways in which I think music has definitely gotten worse. Just to be 200% clear on this, I'm not claiming that all music has gotten worse than it was at some mystical moment in the past. I don't know of anyone making that claim. This claim specifically relates to pop music. And I'm also not saying that all pop music has gotten worse, that there are no good pop songs today. In fact, I think in the last 5 or 10 years, there have been a number of pop songs that are probably just as good along pretty much any metric as some of the great classic pop songs from history. My point is simply that things appear to be trending in the wrong direction. I should say that there are many reasons why music is trending in the direction that it's trending. And one of these reasons is something that I can entirely empathize with. In fact, as we'll see, it relates directly to my criteria for judging good music. This is the fact that to stand out in any way, shape, or form, music has to be in some sense novel. It has to strike the right balance between familiarity on the one hand and novelty on the other. Music researchers call this quality salience. A thing is salient, attention demanding, to the extent that it takes an expectation that we have and twists it. Now, if something is so novel and so outside the box that we can not form any expectations about it, then it fails this test. We don't get it at all, and we stop trying to get it, and we simply tune it out. And then on the other hand, if something is so familiar that it requires basically zero attention to process, then likewise, we tune it out, we stop paying attention. So artists have always faced this challenge of hitting that bullseye between familiarity on the one hand and novelty on the other. Now, there are some good ways to solve this problem, and there are some less good ways to solve this problem. And we're going to look at some of the less good ways to solve this problem. Some of the ways that have become more and more prominent among songs that are making it to the Billboard Top 10. But the point I wanted to make at the outset is that there are many factors, and there's this one really big one that I can entirely empathize with. So how are artists trying to solve this problem today? When I looked at the 660 plus songs on my playlist of the Billboard Top 10 hits from the last 60 plus years, including all of the top 10 hits from 2024 up to the point I made the playlist, four themes stuck out to me. I call these the 4 V's. They are vulgarity, vanity, violence, and victimhood mentality. And each of these is an exaggeration of some quality of music that has worked in the past. And it's an attempt, each of these is an attempt by musicians to continue to push the boundaries in a specific way musically. But in each case, I think these are bad attempts. I think they're attempts that push the wrong boundaries. And I think it'll be clear as we go through these why I regard these as the wrong boundaries for musicians to be pushing. Sex is an incredibly important value. There's nothing wrong with writing songs about sex. In fact, I advocate having a sexy time playlist to, Sexy music regards sex as important. It recognizes that sex is the absolute height of intimacy, and thus we should enjoy it. But to really enjoy it means doing it with the right person in the right circumstances. And here, the right person doesn't just mean that they have the right physical characteristics. It means that you regard them as having good character. There's somebody that you want to associate with and continue to associate with over time. By contrast, vulgar music treats sex as unimportant because it promotes this view that we should have it indiscriminately, or perhaps more precisely, that we should discriminate only on the basis of a person's physical characteristics and think very little or next to nothing about who that person is as a person. So, some examples. I Wanna Sex You Up by Color Me Bad, the #2 hit of 1991. Baby Got Back by Sir Mix-a-Lot, #2 hit of 1992. Freak Me by Silk was #5 in 93. All For You by Janet Jackson, #3 in 2001. I Wanna Love You by Akon, #8 in 2007. Lollipop by Lil Wayne, #4 in 2008. Love in This Club by Usher, #8 in 2008. And Big Energy by Latto, #7 in 2022. Can we say with any sort of objectivity that sexy music is great for your life, but vulgar music is not? I sure think so. And I don't think this requires a ton of life experience to validate. Let me stress, this is not at all about being in a committed monogamous relationship. This is about being selective regarding the type of people that you're going to share this level of intimacy with. If you're unselective, you invite into your life the kind of people that perhaps you really don't want to spend time with, and you signal to the better type of people that you would like to spend time with that they shouldn't spend time with you. There are even countless songs on this theme, like I'm Sorry by Brenda Lee, which I talked about in my last video. Music that catalyzes you to act in ways that are bad for your life is bad music. And I don't think it's silly nostalgia to care about the ways in which music has gotten worse. That's like saying that caring about an obesity epidemic or widespread mental health issues or a big uptick in the rate of heart attacks is silly nostalgia for a time prior to all of these bigger problems. Okay, next let's look at the definite uptick in the number of Billboard Top 10 songs that are promoting the theme of vanity. Again, here we can contrast vanity with the thing that it's an over-exaggeration of, which is pride. Pride is a good thing. Pride is being aware of your character, knowing the type of character that you've built, knowing the things that you've accomplished, and esteeming yourself for those wins. Vanity, though, is this inflated and unwarranted feeling of pride or something like pride, and it often stems from caring more about what others think of you than about what you think of yourself. When people dress to impress, or flash their cash, or otherwise try to show off their success in an arrogant way, it's not because they feel so proud of what it is that they've accomplished. It's actually typically because they lack self-esteem and they're fishing for the esteem of others. What are some examples of this? Can't Nobody Hold Me Down by Puff Daddy, #5 in 1997. Into Club by 50 Cent, #1 in 2003. Glamorous by Fergie. I think this is probably the most benign possible example of this, but that was #10 in 2007. Fancy by Iggy Azalea featuring Charli XCX, #4 in 2014. And Seven Rings by Ariana Grande, #7 in 2019. Now, we might disagree over whether this or that song showcases pride or vanity, but hopefully what I've convinced you of is that there is a difference that makes a difference here, and it's something worth paying attention to. I think it's pretty obvious that vanity is detrimental to one's life, and music that showcases it, that spotlights it, that romanticizes it, that spreads it, is bad music. Bad because, generally speaking, These things are bad for your life, and music that catalyzes you to think and act in that way is bad music. Might there be occasions when a song showcasing vanity is totally appropriate? Yeah, I think so, and especially when it's clear from the context that actually what's happening is that it's poking fun at that vanity. So for instance, if you were soundtracking a TV show and you had a character that was kind of a vain dick, you'd want a song that really conveys those vibes. And this is an instance in which vain music is perfectly appropriate. It does exactly that. Likewise, if you're some super ambitious musician that wants to write like a rock opera or something on that scale, and you want to convey a vain character, then you're going to need songs that showcase that vanity. But it's clear from the surrounding context that what you're actually doing is poking fun at it. Kind of like You'll Be Back, sung by King George III from the Hamilton soundtrack, for instance. Now, this same point about context making a difference for how we should evaluate a song, I think it applies to every category that we're looking at in every category period, but it's definitely worth stressing in the context of the next theme that I think is really emphasized in a lot of modern pop music, which is violence.
Some examples are Lean Back by Terror Squad featuring Fat Joe and Remy Ma, number 10 in 2004. Ridin by Chamillionaire featuring Krayzie Bone, number 10 in 2006. Rockstar by Post Malone featuring 21 Savage, number 5 in 2018. Kill Bill by SZA, number 3 in 2023. Super Gremlin by Kodak Black, number 9 in 2022.
Are there occasions where violence or violent music or aggressive music is appropriate? Absolutely, yes, there is. You can use it to pump yourself up before going to the gym or while working out, before a sporting event, or if you happen to be in that situation before going to war or repelling some kind of invader from your home. I think that if you use aggressive or violent music for these perfectly legitimate purposes, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think it's a good thing. But what about simply stewing in violent music for the sake of the violent music, like all the time? How is that going to change how you think and act? How is it going to change how you drive in rush hour traffic, or treat your family or a customer service representative, or comment on YouTube? Is that going to be bad for your life if you simply listen to and stew in violent music all the time? I think that the question pretty much answers itself. Okay, I've saved the hardest for last, victimhood or victimhood mentality. And this, I think, has an interesting contrast with vanity. So with vanity, people mistakenly seek self-esteem from other people. But of course, self-esteem can only come from oneself. Whereas with victimhood mentality, people seek pity from other people. Now, let me make a really important point before you fly to the comments on this one. As I've said before, music that helps us fully experience our emotions by beautifully encapsulating something in a memorable way, in a moving way, is a tremendous life-serving value. In a sense, this kind of art turns us inside out. It gives us an external experience of something deep inside of us. In a sense, you can think of this as a sort of psychological mirror, and getting a good look at what it is we're experiencing can help us to process that, and more importantly, to move on from it so that we can continue in life toward things that are really enjoyable. Now, victimhood mentality is not about getting that psychological mirror so that you can get more clear about your own experience. It's not about you seeing yourself, it's about other people seeing you in that state and pitying you. And I say it's the hardest to discuss because in practice it's the hardest to distinguish victimhood mentality from legitimate expressions of grief, of sadness, of longing, of what have you. So I think whether a given song is an instance of victimhood mentality is the thing that is easiest to disagree about, because it's the one that probably even more so than the others is most contextual. Your context is a huge factor in determining whether a given song, listening to a given song, is good or bad for you. Just as what's good or bad for a bodybuilder to eat is different than what is good or bad for an 8-year-old to eat. But just as there's a definite matter of fact in the case of diet, so there's a definite matter of fact in the case of musical diet. It's not subjective because it's not just open to anyone's feelings or emotions about whether or not something is good or bad for them. There's a matter of fact about it. It's contextual, but not subjective, and that's a really important difference. And again, in the case of victimhood mentality, it's really difficult to know whether a given song serves a healthy, reflective purpose for a given person or an unhealthy, brooding one. And even in saying that or in hearing it, it's clear that the poison is often, if not always, in the dosage. If you're constantly stewing in mopey music, that much more clearly is going to have a negative impact on you in your life than if you just like occasionally can't help but belt out the chorus for Ironic by Alanis Morissette when it happens to come on. But let's consider some perhaps at least kind of more straightforward examples of victimhood mentality. How You Remind Me by Nickelback, which was number 1 in 2002. Blurry by Puddle of Mud, number 10 in 2002. Unwell by Matchbox 20 was number 6 in 2003. Creepin' by Metro Boomin, The Weeknd, and 21 Savage, which came out this year, 2024. Now, as you might have just picked up, another interesting tidbit about victimhood mentality is that it's not nearly as prevalent in today's Billboard Top 10 as it once was, or as any of the other 3 of the 4 Vs are. It seems to have its greatest legs in genres that don't as often cross over into the pop charts, like rock, alternative, singer-songwriter, maybe some country. Victimhood mentality seems to have had its heyday in the Billboard Top 10 in like the early 2000s, which was the last time that rock music significantly crossed over into the pop charts. Since then, victimhood mentality has really lost ground in the pop charts to vanity, and it's really not hard to see why. I mean, who would you rather be, this boastful braggart or this whiny wuss? Okay, so those are 4 themes that I think have really gained ground, become more and more prevalent in the Billboard Top 10 since about the 90s or so, which is hard for me to say as a child of the 90s. But vulgarity, vanity, violence, and to a lesser extent, victimhood mentality have continued to get more and more popular. Now, I'm definitely not saying that this is an exhaustive look at everything that has gotten worse with pop music in the last few decades. What I've been talking about relates to just one of 4 categories that I'm currently using to judge good from bad music. It's the category of theme, what a given work is about. There's a ton to say about the other 3 categories, but I'm going to lay those out in another video. But in just this one category, I think we can pretty clearly see why it's valid to say that pop music has definitely gotten worse. And caring about that and talking about it is not simply silly nostalgia. Although I can totally understand where this commenter was coming from, I hope I've made clear, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to make clear, that there's more meat on the bone than just naive longing for some prior utopia. Whatever the causes, whether they relate to the music industry or to the culture or to some big and complicated combination of many things, as is probably the case, the point is that there is a there, and that it makes sense to care about it. There is something important to investigate and, to whatever extent we can, to try to do something to reverse. Because ultimately what I want, and what I hope you want too, is a world of more good music. More life-enhancing music that raises our sights instead of lowering them. Thanks for watching. As always, if you want to show me you care, like, subscribe, and share.